It's something that's difficult to put into words, and yet it's one of the most tangible things I've experienced. And that is this: people who have awakened to their true nature emit a kind of signal, a frequency, if you will, that others who are awake can detect immediately, while those who are still asleep remain completely oblivious to it. Now, I'm not talking about anything mystical or supernatural here. I'm not suggesting some sort of telepathic communication or psychic phenomenon. What I'm describing is far more subtle, far more ordinary, and yet in its ordinariness, quite extraordinary. It's something that happens in plain sight, and yet most people never notice it at all. Let me try to explain what this signal is. Though I must warn you, like trying to describe the taste of water to someone who's never drunk anything, this is not easy to put into words. But we must try, because understanding this signal might help you recognize it in others, and more importantly, might help you recognize when you yourself have begun to transmit it. The first thing to understand is that this signal is not something that awakened people do deliberately. It's not a technique they've learned or a behavior they've adopted. It's simply what happens when someone stops pretending, stops performing, stops maintaining the elaborate fiction of being a separate, defended ego moving through a hostile world. The signal is, in a sense, the absence of pretense, and that absence can be detected just as surely as a presence can. Think of it this way: most people go through life broadcasting static. They're constantly putting out this noise of anxiety, of trying to control things, of defending their position, of managing their image. It's like they're a radio station that's not quite tuned in properly. There's all this interference, all this crackle and hiss, and they're so used to this static that they think it's normal. They think everyone broadcasts this way. But when someone awakens, the static stops. Suddenly there's clarity, there's silence, there's an openness. And if you're someone who's also awakened, who's also experienced this stopping of the static, you can detect that clarity immediately. It stands out like a bell tone in a room full of noise. Now, what does this actually look like in practical terms? How does this signal manifest in everyday interaction? Let me give you some examples. Though I must stress that no single characteristic defines it, it's more like a constellation of qualities that together create an unmistakable impression. First, there's something about the eyes. People who are awake have a different quality of gaze. It's not that they stare at you intensely. That would be another kind of performance, another kind of ego game. It's more that when they look at you, they're really looking. They're present. They're here. There's no distance, no evaluation, no judgment happening behind the eyes. They're not looking at you through a filter of their own thoughts and judgments. They're simply seeing. Most people, when they look at you, they're not really seeing you at all. They're seeing their idea of you, their judgment of you, their interpretation of you. They're thinking about what you think of them, or what they should say next, or how they appear to you. The actual seeing is lost in all this mental activity. But awakened people see directly. And you can feel this when they look at you. It's simultaneously intimate and impersonal. Intimate because they're really present with you, really seeing you. Impersonal because they're not doing it from the position of a separate self, trying to get something from you or protect itself from you. It's just seeing happening. And if you're awake yourself, you recognize this quality instantly. Second, there's something about their presence, the way they inhabit space. Most people are either too much or too little in their body. Either they're trying to make themselves larger, more impressive, taking up space in an aggressive way, or they're trying to make themselves smaller, invisible, apologetic for their existence. They're constantly adjusting their presence based on the social situation, on who's around, on what's expected. Awakened people simply are. They take up exactly the amount of space they take up, without apology and without aggression. There's a naturalness to their presence that's quite striking once you notice it. They move through the world with a kind of ease, as if they belong here not in an entitled way, but in the way a tree belongs in a forest, or a fish belongs in water. They're at home in existence. This creates what I can only describe as a gravitational field around them. Not that they're trying to attract attention, quite the opposite. But there's something about their settledness, their non-resistance to being here, that's palpable. Other awakened people sense this immediately. It's like recognizing someone from your hometown when you're traveling in a foreign country. There's an instant sense of, you're from here too. Except in this case, here means this present moment, this reality beyond thought. Third, there's the quality of their speech and silence. When awakened, people speak. Their words come from a different place. Not from the chattering mind, not from the need to fill silence, not from the compulsion to prove something or defend something. The words arise naturally in response to what's actually happening, rather than as a continuation of some internal dialogue that was going on before you met them. And more tellingly, they're comfortable with silence. Most people are terrified of silence in social situations. They feel compelled to fill every gap in conversation with words, with noise, with anything to avoid that uncomfortable quiet. But awakened people rest in silence as naturally as in speech. The silence isn't empty or awkward for them, it's full, pregnant with presence. When two awakened people meet, there can be long stretches of silence that feel completely natural, completely comfortable. They're communing in the silence, present together without needing the constant mediation of words. And this, I think, is one of the clearest signals, the ability to be silent together without discomfort. Fourth, there's an absence of the usual social games. You know the games, I mean the jockeying for position, the subtle one-upmanship, the careful management of image, the defensive maneuvers, the testing and probing to see where you stand in relation to the other person. Most social interaction is riddled with these games, so much so that people don't even realize they're playing them. But awakened people have dropped out of these games, not because they think they're above them or because they've decided to be different. They've simply seen through them. The games require a belief in the separate self, in the importance of one's position and status and image. And when that belief falls away, the games fall away with it. This makes awakened people quite refreshing to be around. Once you're used to it, there's no hidden agenda, no subtle manipulation, no complex social calculus happening. They're straightforward, direct, simple. What you see is what you get. And other awakened people recognize this immediately. It's like a breath of fresh air after being in a stuffy room. Now, here's something interesting. The signal can't be faked. You can't pretend to be awake and fool someone who actually is awake. Because the signal isn't something you do, it's something you are. Or rather, it's what shines through when you stop doing, when you stop pretending, when you stop maintaining all the elaborate defenses and performances of the ego. I've seen people try to imitate the characteristics I'm describing. They try to gaze deeply at others. They try to be comfortable with silence. They try to be straightforward and game-free. But it comes across as another performance, another role they're playing. The static is still there. It's just dressed up as spirituality now. And other genuinely awakened people can sense this immediately. The signal is missing, even though the externals might look similar. This is why awakening can't be taught as a technique or a behavior. You can't learn to transmit this signal. It emerges naturally when the illusion of separation falls away. It's the fragrance of the flower, not something the flower tries to produce. And just as you can't teach a flower to be fragrant, you can't teach someone to emit this signal. You can only point toward the conditions that allow awakening to happen, and then the signal emerges by itself. Now, let me tell you about something else I've observed. The signal varies in strength and clarity. Some people who are awakened transmit it powerfully. You can sense it from across a room. Others transmit it more subtly. You might need to be in conversation with them for a while before you recognize it. This doesn't necessarily correlate with how deeply awakened they are. It's more a matter of constitution, of temperament, of the particular way consciousness expresses through that individual form. Some awakened people are naturally charismatic, naturally magnetic. Others are quiet, unassuming, easy to overlook. But if you're awake yourself, you'll eventually detect the signal, regardless of how it's packaged. It's like recognizing your native language being spoken, even if it's spoken quietly, even if it's mixed with other languages. You recognize it. There's also this phenomenon I've noticed. The signal gets stronger the more time you spend in the company of other awakened people. It's as if the frequency reinforces itself, amplifies itself. When awakened people gather together, there's a quality to the space that's quite unmistakable. The silence becomes deeper. The presence becomes more palpable. It's not that individual people become more awakened, it's more that the shared space of consciousness becomes more evident. This is why communities of practice can be valuable, not because the practice itself creates awakening, but because being in the company of others who have awakened can help you recognize and stabilize your own awakening. The signal becomes clearer when it's being reflected back to you from multiple directions. But here's something crucial. The signal isn't something to seek or try to cultivate. That would just be another ego game, another way of trying to become special or spiritual. The signal is simply what's left when you stop all the seeking, all the trying, all the attempting to become something other than what you are. Let me tell you about a quality that's perhaps the most subtle aspect of this signal. There's a kind of transparency to awakened people. It's as if you can see through them to something beyond them. They're not opaque, not defended, not hiding behind layers of personality and self-image. There's an openness, a permeability about them. This doesn't mean they don't have personality or individual characteristics. They do. But these characteristics are held lightly, worn like loose clothing rather than tight armor. You sense that they could let go of any of it at any moment, that they're not identified with their personality in the way most people are. And this transparency allows something to shine through them. Call it consciousness, call it presence, call it being, call it God, if you like. Whatever you call it, it's recognizable. It's the same thing that shines through all awakened people, regardless of their individual differences. And when you're awake yourself, you recognize it instantly, the way you recognize your own face in a mirror. Now, I want to talk about something that might seem paradoxical. Even though awakened people emit this signal and recognize it in each other, there's no sense of us versus them, no sense of being part of an exclusive club or special group, because the awakening itself reveals that there is no separate self, no real boundary between us and them, no actual division between awakened and unawakened. The recognition of the signal isn't about identifying who's in and who's out. It's more like recognizing different expressions of the same reality. Some expressions are more transparent, some are more clouded, some are more conscious, some are more veiled. But it's all the same reality, the same consciousness, playing different roles, wearing different masks. So when an awakened person recognizes the signal in another, it's not, here's someone who's achieved what I've achieved. It's more like, here's another aperture through which consciousness is looking at itself clearly. There's a recognition, yes, but not a sense of superiority or exclusivity. In fact, one of the characteristics of genuine awakening is the absence of any sense of being special or superior because of it. The awakened person sees that awakening doesn't belong to them, doesn't make them better than anyone else. It's just what's happening through this particular form. And this absence of spiritual ego is itself part of the signal. Other awakened people can sense when someone is genuinely humble about their awakening versus when someone is using their awakening as a new identity to prop up their ego. Let me describe another aspect of this signal that's quite distinctive. Awakened people have a quality of stillness about them, even when they're moving and active. It's as if there's a deep quietness at their center that's not disturbed by the activity on the surface. Like a lake that's calm at the bottom, even when there are waves on the surface. Most people are the opposite. They have turbulence all the way through. Their minds are constantly churning, even when their bodies are still. But awakened people have discovered the stillness underneath the movement, the silence underneath the sound. And this stillness is palpable. You can feel it when you're around them. It's part of the signal. This stillness isn't about being passive or inactive. Awakened people can be quite dynamic, quite engaged with life, but the activity doesn't disturb the essential stillness. It's like they've found the still point, the center of the turning wheel, and they operate from there even as they participate fully in the dance of life. Now, here's something important to understand. Detecting this signal doesn't require any special psychic ability or supernatural perception. It's actually quite ordinary. We all have the capacity to detect it. It's just that most people are so caught up in their own static that they can't tune in to these subtler frequencies. It's like trying to hear a quiet voice in a noisy room. The voice is there, but you can't hear it over all the noise. When your own mind quiets down, when the static diminishes, suddenly you can hear what was there all along. The signal doesn't change. Your capacity to detect it changes. This is why practices like meditation can be valuable, not because they create anything new, but because they help quiet the static, help you tune in to what's already present. And once you've learned to detect the signal, you can't really unlearn it. It becomes part of how you perceive the world. Let me tell you about one more aspect of this signal that I find particularly beautiful. There's a quality of non-manipulation about awakened people. They're not trying to get you to see things their way, not trying to convince you of anything, not trying to change you or fix you. They're simply present with what is, including you as you are. This doesn't mean they're indifferent or uncaring, quite the opposite. But their caring doesn't take the form of trying to control or manipulate. They trust life, trust the process, trust that everyone is exactly where they need to be for their own unfolding. This trust creates a space around them that feels very safe. You can be yourself without fear of judgment or pressure to be different. And other awakened people recognize this quality immediately. It's part of the signal, this absence of manipulation, this presence of trust. It's like recognizing someone who speaks your language but doesn't try to make you speak it back. They're content to communicate or not communicate, to connect or not connect, without any agenda about how it should be. So what's the practical value of understanding this signal? Well, for one thing, it can help you recognize genuine teachers and guides versus those who are still operating from ego but have draped it in spiritual garb. The signal can't be faked, and if you learn to detect it, you won't be easily fooled by spiritual showmanship or impressive credentials. More importantly, understanding the signal can help you recognize your own awakening. You might doubt your own experience, might think you're fooling yourself or haven't really awakened. But if you find that other awakened people recognize the signal in you, if you find that you're able to detect it in them, that's confirmation. Not that you need external confirmation. Awakening is self-evident when it happens. But sometimes it's helpful to have that reflection, that recognition from others. And perhaps most importantly, understanding this signal can help you trust that you're not alone. Even in a world where most people are still caught in the dream, there are others who are awake. And you'll find each other drawn together by this signal that operates below the level of consciousness.